11th, 2021. And again, as a Zoom meeting, I welcome everyone as both members and guests. First and foremost, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I am 8. And
We have no Nord, so we need someone for him.
Nord. Okay, thank you. So we will sit, Tom was here first, so we'll sit Tom Hastings for Nord. Okay, so that gives us a full complement of 9 plus the 2 alternates, Bruce and Doug, obviously not voting, but we appreciate your input on any of our discussion. Okay, seating of alternates completed. Review of minutes from December 14th, besides the length and girth of the minutes. Any issues?
There's one typo. Let's see. On the second to last page, when we voted on the motion on the industrial zone,
Yep.
at the bottom of all our names, it says motion passed with no nay votes. Is that, I'm sorry, that's correct. It's not a typo. I just misread it.
Oh, okay. No problem. That's fine. Thank you for taking the time to read so closely. We appreciate it. Having heard nothing else on that, I look for a motion to accept the minutes from the December 14th meeting.
So moved.
Janet moves.
Second. Jerry second.
Jerry DeFresny second, or Dufresne second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Okay, so we've accepted the minutes from that meeting. I would like to do, well, we're going to go to the public comment section here, and also we're going to make I'm going to ask for a slight change on the agenda itself, where following public comments, I'd like to ask for a motion to move up. We have with us, joining us tonight, the Honorable Tammy Nuccio, our 53rd District newly elected state representative. And she asked to join our meeting to both maybe talk to us a little bit and or find out what's important to her constituents, Ashford being part of that group. So let's go with public comments first. Are there any comments from the public out there that wish to be shared?
Yeah, Jeff, I would ask that we have the guests identify themselves.
Okay.
It'll help Valerie.
Sure.
Yep.
We do see Paul Varga coming up.
Yeah, well, Jeff, thanks. You identified me. Paul Varga. I don't have
No
video
problem.
tonight. I'm having an internet issue. So first, just nothing really, just Happy New Year. Hope everybody's doing well. I wanted to welcome Tammy, say congratulations, thank you. And I look forward to dealing with you. If you talk to the commission members, they'll tell you that I'm pretty active in town. So
Thank you, Paul. We lost you there at the last couple of words, but that's okay. I also see on here Mike Panic from the Lake Association.
Yes, good evening, Mike Panic, Lake Chaffee Association President.
Do you have any comments at this point, Mike?
No.
Okay, thank you. I also see under administrator's iPhone, I believe, and I'm sorry, I know we had you all over our meeting last time.
yeah, yes, this is Steve Rodolakis. I am the
Yes.
manager of Ashford Realty Trust LLC.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve, do you have any comments, public comments to share?
Yeah, I do. I'll be brief. My only comment is that I had brought forth an application, and I guess unfortunately for me, the commission didn't like it with respect to a text amendment to your existing IID bylaw, and I understand that, but I'm trying to move forward with some development at this site. At these sites, some of which are in Union and some of which are in Ashford. And under the uses, all of which are permitted only by special permit, doesn't seem that there's a development that could economically. I would say, retail and other things, motor vehicle service and repair stations, farmers markets, manufacturing. Given the lack of infrastructure, utilities, it doesn't seem that many of these would be feasible. So I guess I'm looking for, a little input from the commission, or not tonight. And, I kind of just jumped on in the public comment section, but some input from the commission as to maybe what they would like to see there. Maybe I'm missing something under the existing bylaw that some commission members have some thoughts as to what could go there, or maybe possibly in the context of an amendment to your bylaw, because I understood from Mr. D'Amato that the commission was going to take a look at the bylaw in its entirety and look at some possible amendments. I'd also consider a floating zone, but unfortunately, I don't have a user at this point for the site. So it's tough to propose something and lock yourself in of a user. And, the engineers and the attorneys don't come without expense. So I'm just trying to plant the seed in the commission's mind as to some thoughts as to what they would like potentially to see come to Ashford. Again, nothing I'm looking for a response from tonight.
Jeff, this is Dick. Can I respond to that briefly?
Sure, go ahead, Dick.
We are in the process of going through the entirety of the land use regulations. Presently, the lake areas is on the front burner, and we're going to talk about that tonight. The next one that we'll talk about is the interchange, and what we would want to do is address the entirety of the interchange rather than just changing one or two things. I think I indicated at the last meeting in the public hearing that I looked at other towns and found the height issue is one that was addressed in many, many towns where 45-foot height was not an issue. I also looked at this issue of the size of the building being the deciding factor. And every town that I looked at, which was 6 or 8 towns, it was a percentage of the land area that was the deciding factor, not the size of the building. So those would be the kinds of things we would consider. We would also be very mindful of the impervious zones in the runoff, especially in that area where there is the aquifer and the Maury Pond. But those would be addressed in total, not as a specific change of 1 or 2 items.
Okay. Thank you, Dick. Again, Steve, I appreciate your attendance and your comments to us. On our next meeting, we will put an agenda item together and look to discuss as a commission to try and give some insight that might help you in your efforts to get your property offer your property to someone you feel meets a number of the community needs besides the issues that we're talking about from a structural and perimeter standpoint, the requirements therein. Okay.
Oh, I appreciate that, and I guess I'll check in with Mr. D'Amato. And again, if my engineers or my council could be of any assistance to the PCZ, I'd offer them as a resource.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Okay,
I'm
also
just trying to develop something consistent. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go
I'll
ahead.
check in next month. No, I'm
Okay.
just trying to develop something consistent with what I anticipate may take place in the abutting town of Union. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And also joining us tonight is Catherine Silversmith, our first selectman and ex officio member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Ms. Silversmith, do you have anything to say? You're on mute.
Not tonight, just listening. I also welcome Tammy.
Okay. All right. So any other public comments? I'm not missing anything. All right, very good. And we'll close the public comments, and I will ask for a motion to move the item 8A, Tammy Nuccio, State Representative, to
So move.
next on.
Jer-
That was Jerry
Jerry
for that.
Second,
Seconded by Janet. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? So moved. So welcome, Ms. Nuccio, congratulations. And again, congratulations for your swearing in, and it looked like it went smooth, and we welcome you to the Planning and Zoning.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me tonight. I reached out to see if I've been going to as many of the town meetings, at least one of them that I can for all three towns, to talk about, to introduce myself to you and to talk about any issues that are of importance for your commission that I need to be focusing on in the legislative session. We're getting down to the wire on when I can put bills in. So if it's anything that requires a bill, I'm glad that we're actually able to meet now. And one of the things that I had on my agenda to speak to you guys about is actually on your agenda later on tonight, which is the Desegregate Connecticut initiative that's going on. So I wanted to kind of do a high level and see if you guys had any information that you could provide to me, that when this comes up, I'm looking for kind of a cheat sheet to have in my back pocket for every town of where each town stands with current workforce housing numbers, and also to see if everybody has the 8-30J requirement, which is the workforce housing plan. And if you do not have that, to also let you know that there's going to be a grant opportunity coming up for help in creating that plan. And I think we have about 18 months before it has to be done. So kind of free form, see what's big to you guys. What do you need me to focus on? What issues we're having in Ashford that maybe I can help with? And then any questions that you guys might have on the Desegregate Connecticut initiative.
Tammy, if you could, in a thumbnail, give a summary of what the Desegregate Connecticut is.
Sure. So what I know about it so far is Desegregate Connecticut is an initiative it's being run by Mayor Bronin's wife. And it has to do with the desegregation of Connecticut. And what I've read on it so far is they're really looking for towns outside of the cities. They're looking at possibly trying to get people to modify some zoning. Some of the stuff that I read on it had to do with how many homes that you have that have workforce housing or have the ability to be multi-unit family houses. Also, what are they called? I'm sorry, what are they called? The accessory development, like tiny houses and stuff like that. All of these things can kind of be counted as affordable housing options or workforce housing. And it's important to kind of delineate between where people tend to go when you start talking about workforce housing, which is low income housing. It is a different classification from the workforce housing. Workforce housing has to do with the typical rents in your area and the AMIs and a bunch of other stuff. But where they're really focusing right now is looking at zoning regs and making sure that all towns have some sort of availability for workforce housing. And if you expand on workforce housing, you can think of seniors who are looking to downsize, kids who are just getting out of, well, young adults who are just getting out of college, who are looking to stay in the town that they're in. And one of the main components of it is if you have people that work in your town, can they live in your town, kind of a thing. So there's a lot that is good about this, and there's a little bit that I'm worried about. There's been some talk in the past 18 months or so with Governor Lamont about if your town doesn't meet these numbers that they want, of looking at ways to incent you to by kind of holding back some municipal aid and that. And I'm really hoping they don't go down that path, because we really can't afford to lose any more municipal aid in any of the towns. So if there's anything that you guys are currently have that you can provide that shows the level of workforce housing that you have, or I don't know if you guys are aware of the 8-30J. I'm assuming you probably are, because Michael is, I was with him on Wellington, and I know they're already working on theirs, and they actually got that grant. Michael, did they get it here in Ashford also?
We did not, no. So we will be working on it for the deadline for 2022.
Yeah, I met today with somebody from the Regional Planning Association, and they said that as of right now, that grant, they're thinking it's going to be open again this year. But I'm going to be contacting Mike Santorillo, who is in the Connecticut Connecticut
Department of Housing?
That's it, yes.
Mike
In the Department of
Santoro?
Housing, yes. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be reaching out to him about Tallinn. So if you guys want me to, I'll do both. I'll just say Tallinn and Ashford both need this grant, and find out what I can, when it's going to be available, and how quickly we can get our names on there. Because the lady from the Regional Planning Association was pretty much saying it's an in-depth plan. You have to look at your POCD. You have to. They suggested having a committee on housing, but that to me is kind of a big stretch to try to get all that done in 18 months to put together a committee. And then she said something about a housing needs assessment also, but that may be in part of your POCD already.
The Department of Housing released some guidance not that long ago about what they thought ought to be in the affordable housing plan. So, we would probably use that as a guide. In my estimation of what we've seen from Desegregate CT as it relates to Ashford, I think that the 5 ideas, if they make it into a bill, and some of them I know have made it into their revised bill, would include, so what I think will most dramatically affect Ashford is they are looking to allow the accessory dwelling units as of right, which for just the folks that are listening from the public, accessory dwelling units, like Tammy mentioned, would be like an in-law apartment or an apartment above a garage. Towns would be required to allow them. They would also, they're seeking to mandate that anybody in land use, on a land use board goes through yearly training. They are looking to mandate that towns reduce their parking requirements to sort of make it so that parking doesn't become restrictive or prohibit development, because you've got to have so much parking for something that based on local regs. They want to cap application fees, and they want to, I don't know exactly the format, but they want to basically force towns to also allow in certain locations middle housing, the term middle housing, which is like your 2 to 4 unit housing development. So I don't know, some of those are definitely still in the revised bill. I don't know how it'll all shake out, but I think those are probably the biggest ones that Ashford's gonna want to watch, at least from my perspective.
Thank you. I'm sure I probably just bumped your agenda item for everybody, and I'm sorry about that, but it was one of the larger topics that I felt was going to play out in these 3 towns, is making sure that we at least have a firm understanding of what they're going to be expecting and what we can answer back with what we're doing. Now, I think Ashford has a pretty good leg to stand on because you do have a lot of complexes. You have some apartment complexes and stuff like that. And I think depending on, I don't know much about the rents in those areas, but with apartment complexes, you tend to have more affordable housing options there. So I think you got a good start. Tolland doesn't have that same start. Wellington has a pretty good amount too. So I think that's one place that we can focus on as a positive for Ashford. And if we get this grant, which I will start working on tomorrow, and start getting a plan pulled together that shows initiative on our side, which I think will also help us. But as Michael said, there is a big push for this legislation to go through. I don't know where it's going to stand right now. We haven't really met with anybody. So I just know that it's out there. So I wanted to bring it to your attention so you were aware of it. And then just more importantly, what's going on in Ashford that you need me to focus on?
Talking about this subject, when we did the POCD in 2015, we did look at this issue. And because of the large number of rental units in town, and because of the lower cost residences in the lake areas, we were in relatively good shape compared to a town like St. Holland. But we also noticed of the 169 towns, hardly any were in compliance with what the state was asking for. So we put quite a bit of verbiage in the POCD relative to this, but there was no strong action items. Getting this grant to flesh that out, I think Tammy would be a very good first step.
Yes, I agree. I think we're going to need that detailed work to happen, so we can at least show we've got a plan and how we are going to address what we can before it becomes a stick rather than a carrot.
And in just to reiterate what Dick Williamson just mentioned regarding the POCD, we do know that I think it was like 131 out of 169 towns did not qualify on what was the old, I don't know if it's old right now, state requirement of a 10% affordable housing area. Michael, does that still hold, or is that old news now?
More towns are getting there and are close.
But the 10% still holds?
Yes. So so the numbers are always a year behind. So as of last year, Ashford was about 3.5%, and so for affordable housing, we're talking about, I use the term capital A affordable, which means it's deed restricted for 40 years. So if I tell you that in order for something to qualify as affordable housing, it needs to cost less than $1,200 a month, what that means is there are 67 units in Ashford that are deed restricted to be less than that. So there may very well be many units in Ashford that fall within that number, but they're not deed restricted, so they don't qualify.
I see.
One of the things a lot of towns spend time doing, if they feel that they have the housing they need, but the numbers are low, is taking the time to incentivize property owners to actually just deed restrict the properties that already qualify.
Yeah.
And that's something that we can talk about. But yeah, a lot of towns don't meet the requirement. And I think that when I last looked at Ashford's numbers, as far as housing costs, the percentage was greater on the home ownership side, which basically means when you're talking about people that are cost burdened or spending too much money on housing, it was more prevalent on the homeowner side than it was on the renter side. So it was really a real estate cost that was high. And I don't have the most recent numbers in front of me now, but this is all part of what we'll look at when we get into the affordable housing plan.
And Michael just brought up a very good point. When I met today with the woman that I met with, she said the legislation itself is actually sort of vague because it comes, not that I'm shocked by that, but it comes out it actually says that the 10% is a recommended number for towns, but then it's often referred to as a goal, but it's not listed as a goal in the legislation, and there are no mention anywhere, there's no mention anywhere in the legislation of any kind of fines or penalties for not achieving that number. So it's one of those wishy-washy things where there's this 10% number in there as, hey, you know, this should be, we're recommending every town have 10% of their housing stock be affordable, but there's nothing in there that says this is the number it has to be. So it's kind of taken on a life of its own of the assumption that it is the goal. So that was one of the things she was going to look at and kind of push around on. You guys at 3.5%, that's oddly, it's a good number. You know, it's a good number considering all the other towns in that, but you're still how far away from 10, you know? So it's, to me, it's also relative. We pushed back on available land, how much you are already built out. You know, like if you don't have a lot of land left, like we've got some plots in Tolland, but they're all privately owned. And, you know, as much as I would love to, I can't drag a developer here kicking and screaming and tell them that they have to build something. I don't know how much land the town of Ashford owns that they could build something on, if you even do. You know, we don't in Tolland, and I don't believe Willington really has any either. And a lot of our open space that we have gotten is all also deed restricted. Like when it was transferred over to us, it was with strict, could not develop on it kind of a thing. So that was another thing that I heard, is that they might be looking at how much land you have in open space, and can something like that be converted? You know, today we were told if there's like old strip malls, could that be converted? And I said, again, it's privately owned. Like, I don't know how you go to an owner of a strip mall and say, you know, you don't have enough business here, why don't you close and build apartments? So I don't know where this is going to go. I just want to make sure we're as prepared as we can be with what facts that we have and what we're already doing on our own without anybody making us do anything.
Yeah, what we have where the town is in control, by and large, has been pushed towards conservation. We do have 300 acres plus in what's known as the old wagon shed or Kettle Rock facility, which is an environmentally impaired, but not that impaired, that the town ultimately could take possession of. And that borders on the Route 44, mostly in Ashford, some in Wellington. And we've called it a technology development area, but it could be a mixed use development area. And should the town be able to take possession of that, some portion of that could be used for affordable housing.
I would honestly, just by
Kath,
giving it the mixed use, you would be able to say you have a plan.
Catherine, you had a question. You're on mute.
The phrase of the year, you're on mute. Thank you. I would like to point out that the Kettle Rock property, or the old wagon shed, there's 865,480 in outstanding taxes for Ashford. That property is shared. There's a small part of it is in Willington. And we've been in the process of doing cleanup. We're waiting for another grant to complete brownfield cleanup. But it also has outstanding consent orders. It's got 3 of them. And those are to Kettle Rock Properties, to Benjamin Schilberg, and to the estate of Benjamin Schilberg. So, you know, those outstanding consent orders would have to be something, the state would have to help us with those, I believe. So it's not as straightforward as people might think. There's a lot to it. I can tell you that we work closely with Willington on this one. We're partnering as we go through the cleanup process. And once we get through that, then it will become, what do we want to do with that land? Does the town want to take possession? If so, there's some burden that comes with that. And if not, then it's, you know, how do we want to get this sold? And what kind of development ought to go on it? And that's definitely where planning and zoning would come in.
Yeah.
Also, I sat in on, thank you, Catherine. Also, I sat in on a session for planning and zoning commissioners with Desegregate Connecticut as they went through their who they are and what they're doing, and looking at different examples around the state to give an idea of, again, what's their background, where are they coming from. And one of the things that was frequent in the chat room that came up had to do, and I think this holds for Ashford very, very closely, and for Wellington for that matter, is it's not so much a matter of if you build it, they will come. I mean, if you plan for and build affordable housing, why are they going to come to Ashford and Wellington if there are no jobs? And that was a big comment item that kept coming up throughout this hour and a half presentation that was done in the chat room regarding what generates people needing, wanting, or looking for affordable housing.
Transportation also, if you don't have the transportation to get people to places to work, you don't have, you guys don't have a bus line. So that's another thing. You're going to have a captive populace there without opportunity for work or transportation to other places to work.
Which kind of goes in the face of what Desegregate Connecticut talks about with saying to clean the environment and all too. People living here would have to travel and drive, and more traffic and more fumes and things like this. Again, in opposite to what they're trying to put forward. Yes, Catherine.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I do want to make one more I missed something on the Cattle Rock property.
Okay.
We also have outstanding liens on that property, the Department of Environmental Protection, $282,000, and we have Environmental Protection Agency, $4,394,562. So
what was the group for 4 million?
Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay.
So there's, again, I just wanted to make sure you had the full picture of the monies involved with this one.
Catherine, not for this meeting, but offline.
Yes.
There was quite a bit of work done at one point, looking
Yes.
at how those liens could be addressed. And we could talk about that. I've got about a folder, at least 1.5 inches thick on that.
About the liens, did you say?
About ways the town could get out from underneath those liens. But that's not for this meeting. That's for
Yes,
another.
it's not for this meeting. I think that when all is said and done, we need to do the second part of the cleanup before we can really talk about plans for that piece of property.
And that's very grant reliant from what you're saying. So
Yeah,
it comes back to filing, getting the grants. And that's a lot. That's far too much money for a town like Ashford to assume to try to take over and do. You definitely need help with that.
Any other questions regarding
I'd like,
desegregate? Yes, go ahead, Janet.
I'd like to bring up something sort of related about the senior housing. And we have 32 units. When there's an opening, I think last year she had 20 people apply. They don't get any subsidies, federal or state, so they're really struggling keeping the rent low enough to, they only accept people that the rent is 30% or less of their income, and they've had to turn people away because they don't have enough income. So they're struggling. We're probably going to need more. I mean, we need more senior housing, but who would build it when, it's not economically feasible to build it? So even if we zone it or had a spot where we wanted to put it, I don't see that it would be built. And I think that's going to be a huge need in the future. A lot of people bring their parents here, so they'll be near them as they get older.
So is that something, Tammy, that possibly either state or federal grants we could find out about?
Well, I'm thinking here in Tolland, we had a school building. We had Parker School that was kind of left open, and we partnered with the state and Access Connecticut, and they turned that school into, I think it's 36 or 38 units of senior housing. And it is income locked because there were federal grants and state grants involved. So you can't go over a certain income level, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know if you guys have any kind of old building or property like that, we could definitely pursue seeing if the state would invest in turning something into a senior housing unit. But they were kind of working with an already existing building, and they just took it over, gutted it, redid it, and made it into senior housing. So I don't know if you guys have anything like that, but you're right. You know, that's our next real big shortage and crisis, is especially as the boomers age way out, the older boomers, you know, you're looking at housing shortages left and right, because well, let's be honest, a lot of them can't afford to live in their homes with the taxes what they are in that as they get older. So having some sort of affordable housing option, I'm all for that. And if we can find a way, if we can find some place in town that you want to build that, then I can definitely start trying to partner up with Access or any of the other places around here that would look to kind of partner and do that, because it is a shortfall. And like, I agree, the lines to get into these places they're like sometimes 50, 60 people deep for one room.
Yeah, the land that's around the senior housing facility that exists, there's plenty of room to build more. It's just a case of finding the funds to build it. There is no old buildings that can be converted in town.
So you have the space to build, so you would need a partner to come in and build the housing.
Correct.
Okay. And that's right down by the town hall, right? Across from the town hall area?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, Catherine.
Do we have areas of town that are, have been marked as being areas where we could do that kind of development? I didn't think so. I'm looking at Michael.
Nope.
No, I don't think we have that. So when we say that we have plenty of space in town to do something like that, I think you really need to step back and look at what makes sense, you know, from an aquifer perspective, all of that, to make sure that, you know, if you're going to put something like that somewhere in town, you know where you want to put it. Not just make an assumption that you're going to have a place at this point, and what that, and how big that's going to be.
I think, Catherine, if you look at the footprint of the land around the senior housing facility, you could easily expand that facility from what it is today.
Like I said, I would expect that you would have that in your plan of conservation and development.
Or more importantly, going forward, if you get this grant and you have to do this housing plan, this becomes part of your housing plan. If you're looking at trying to expand senior housing, then you can use some of this grant and this entire plan to look for opportunities to increase that. So again, we're kind of getting back to getting us this grant, you know, getting this first grant to get this written within the next 18 months, kind of a thing, to do that research. You know, the housing needs of the community. Obviously, you're going to have the senior portion to that.
Okay. Yeah, we really beat up that section on the agenda for Greater Connecticut.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I jumped in too. I took all the new business away.
We're out of here. Okay. I guess one of the other things that came up, I think earlier, if not this past year, the year before, was something that came up through the legislature. And maybe, again, Dick Williams can fill us in a little bit more, but it was a proposal that the state of Connecticut take over regulating all zoning in the state, as opposed to leaving it up to the municipalities. Am I going down the right path, Michael?
There's nothing, there's been a lot of discussion about creating model zoning regulations, but then there's been a lot of discussion about regionalization. There's been some discussion about changing and reassigning. Right now, you, as the Planning and Zoning Commission, authorizes the zoning officer to enforce the regs. There's been some discussion about taking that and making the chief elected official be the one that appoints the zoning officer, but I haven't heard of anything recent regarding just state zoning. Certainly nothing pending.
There's nothing that is pending, but it's been something that has been discussed. There's kind of a backdoor thing to that, to Jeff and your list, which is training and certification of planning and zoning commissioners. And that kind of models what's been done with registrars. Registrars are elected, but they're also paid for what they do. Planning and zoning commissioners are a non-paid position, and requiring them to be certified is like an oxymoron. I mean, we have all sorts of commissions, wetlands, economic development. Should everyone that volunteers for a non-paid position be required to become certified? And my personal opinion is no. We hold strong to local control of our land and our development. And frankly, Tammy, should these things come up, we would hope that you would support keeping those items local.
I think the towns need to have their autonomy. I understand where desegregate Connecticut is going, and we want to make sure we've got affordable housing options, but taking all control for planning out of the hands of the towns, to me, would be catastrophic.
All you need to do is look at Westchester County, New York, and see what that could do.
Okay.
But I think it would be beneficial to have more training opportunities for us.
Yes, and there is at least twice a year training opportunities offered, and I've attended several of them. I can't think of the organization, but it's basically the land use attorneys that provide the training, and they're very helpful, and they're a good way to make sure that we stay out of trouble with the rulings that we make. And I think we've encouraged every one of our existing and newer members to attend those training sessions. And I would even go so far as to say that every new member that comes onto the commission should attend at least one of them.
And I think that might be part of the difference too, is that it is voluntary. Not only is the position voluntary, but the training is voluntary. Whereas maybe some type of, more than once a year, offering it something on a more regular basis that allows for the transition of elected officials, alternates, and things like this, that covers adequately without a significant outlay of cash for the small towns to try and keep up with this, but require some type of training and certification as opposed to just a voluntary basis.
It's a lot that goes into all these voluntary positions.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else, any questions or any issues that they wish to bring up as Tammy moves forward with the legislature and the agenda, the upcoming agenda?
One last item is we did our plan of conservation development in 2015. We'll be coming up on the next one not too long, and we've been trying to keep up with modifying them. I could not help but look at the amount of state and federal money that Mansfield received to do their plan. It was in the millions of dollars. We did ours on our own nickel. If there's a way that could be funded with at least some portion of funding on the state level, since this has to dovetail into the regional and the state plan of conservation and development, it would be a help to the small towns like ours.
Well said, Dick.
Can you guys let me know when you're getting closer to that and we can look into it? I'll be honest with you. I don't think Tolland got anything either. I didn't even know that there were grants available to help with the POCD. So if Willington got something, I can follow up with them to find out what they got.
The
And then-
Mansfield, sorry, the Mansfield grant was a community development block grant, which is a little different. It's not for the POCD. I agree. I'm not aware of any money available from anybody to help a town develop a POCD. So yeah, Mansfield has a huge grant that they were eligible for that'll be administered out of that office, but it's not the 10-year comprehensive plan.
Yeah, but Mike, it fed right into it. And
But it wouldn't apply for us. We would not be able to use those funds to develop a POCD. Trust me, if there was POCD money, there would be planners all over Connecticut, be all over that 6 Ways to Sunday. And I would make sure Ashford was in line. Unfortunately, that's one thing there just isn't money for right now.
I understand that one last statement is that it ended up feeding to their plan of conservation development and other planning documents. It was substantial and involved both state and federal funds.
Anything else for Ms. Nuccio? Tammy, I want to thank you for joining us. You're more than welcome to stay on. You might have better things to do with your time. I'm sure you do. But again, you're more than
About
welcome to stay on.
250 emails over here already.
Sure.
But before I leave, I just want to make sure you guys have for your minutes. If you have anything that you need to get in touch with me for, you can reach me at my tammy.nuccio@cga.ct.gov. That one actually goes directly through to me. It won't go through my legislative aide. I'm giving that to the boards and such on the time. I'm giving it to everybody. I've got the minutes right now, but basically for you guys, if you have something that you need to get a hold of me to, that's probably the quickest way to do it. And then my cell phone is 860-729-7122. If I haven't gotten back to you, then feel free to text me. I'm not answering every phone number that I don't recognize because I'm getting slammed with them. So I just wait for the voicemail. So if you leave me a voicemail, then I'll get back to you if I don't answer. But I try to be as open and available as possible. Any way that you have to get a hold of me, please feel free to.
Could you repeat your email?
Sure, it's Tammy, TAMMY .Nuccio, NUCCIO @cga.ct.gov.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. So anything you guys need, please feel free to reach out.
Very good. Thank you again for joining
Thank
us.
you for having me.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, thank you everyone for your input on that, and thank you for being as well versed as you were in the issues that we're facing. We'll talk a little bit more on this, kind of bring it together with the desegregate. There are a couple of other items that I'm going to offer up for us to talk about. Go to bills on the agenda next. Alex, anything?
No, I have no bills.
No bills. Correspondence? Any
I have no
correspondence?
I don't have any correspondence either tonight.
Okay. The only thing I will say is that, and I think I'm going to follow through, is just the other day I got an email from John Filchek, who saw on our agenda that we were going to be talking about Desegregate Connecticut. And NECOG is one of the 30 member groups of the coalition working with Desegregate Connecticut. And he offered up attending our meeting and talking about the Desegregate Connecticut actions and what they're looking to do and the input that NECOG has had with them. And I told him not to, it came in late and I responded back to him late, and I wanted to get a feel for what the group was wondering about this. And again, to possibly gather questions that we could send to John also. So if you do have any questions that come up either, now as we talk or later on after the meeting, please send them to me. I'll forward them on to John. And if we have something worthwhile, we'll add them to our meeting next time to both talk to us in general, as well as try and answer some of those questions.
Could you spell his last name, please?
Yes, Michael, help me. It's Filchek. AK. John, John.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I have a question. Did Michael say we have to have this done by 2022?
So there was a grant application, and And so it was a first come, first served. They had triple the applicants than money. And if you got the grant, you have to have it done basically by June, because that's when the state year for the grant funds expires, but the statute gives you more time.
Statute's July of 2022.
So yeah, we have more time than, got about 18 months.
Will there be more grant money?
I obviously, I work for a company. We are writing for towns in Connecticut, probably 7 or 8 affordable housing plans. And this is the first I'm hearing that the state is considering additional funding through grants. It was, like I said, first come, first serve. There was no competition. If you got in and they had the money, they sent it out. So while you've been talking, I've been sending some emails to some people to see if this is actually something that the state is considering, just to kind of figure out where we stand with that.
Is this the type of thing where we're going to have to look at all of our regulations, go through them?
This is a very specific, tailored, concise document that is focused on how Ashford what Ashford can do to increase the number of deed restricted affordable housing units. So we will look at the housing that we have, the market, the land, kind of where we need to go, what's appropriate, and try to pull it all together to come up with an approach for the things that can be done. Many of these plans are, less than 20 pages. We're not talking a POCD type process. There will be public engagement and public outreach and survey and that type of thing, but we're not talking a document that's 60 or 80 or 100 pages that takes, 6 months to do. That's not been the case for the ones that have been done so far. And the guidance that came from the Department of Housing does not envision something quite so substantial.
If we could hold the discussion, further discussion on this for the next section,
Sure.
We'll finish that off. But thank you very much.
Jeff, I'll simply offer one comment, and this pertains to something that we should add to the agenda. We had asked Mr. Filczek for months and months and months and months to provide a revised zoning map, with which he never responded to. So having him come in and weigh on something that he wants to weigh in on, I would ask that he be responsive to all things we ask him for, not just what he wants to respond to.
Understood. Thank you, Dick. Okay, we had no correspondence. The number 6 item, election of officers. I don't think it's something that I missed in reviewing the agenda, where we really don't have that on our schedule. Per our bylaws, our election of officers takes place following the biennial election, the month or the meeting following the election, as long as there are the proper number of members in attendance, and it needs to be a combination of members and alternates of 9 at a minimum to elect officers. And but I don't think we need that requirement right now. One, we had no new members in the election. The election that we did, the last vote was in 19, so we don't come due again until 21, November of 21. And so I just think that not even tabled. I just think it's just an error on the agenda for the election of officers at this time, unless anyone has some type of objection. Hearing none, we'll move on to the unfinished business. Let me ask this question first before I ask for another item. Michael, are you able to lock off or whatever private holding room or whatever it is if we go into executive session?
I can definitely do it. We've got a few people here by phone, but I think I can kick them over. We'll have to try it, but I can do it on my end.
Okay. And what's the best way to get back to you to get you back on board? Do we text you or what do we do
For executive session,
to get you to put people back in?
yeah, if you don't want me in the executive session, then I guess someone could just let me know when you're done and I will end the room and it will give people 60 seconds and it'll bring them back into the regular meeting.
Okay, do we call you, email you, text you?
Whatever you want to do. What's easier?
You tell us what's easier for you. What are you monitoring?
I monitor everything. This is like, this is mission control here.
And Central, Houston, we have a problem.
I think I have, let me make sure I have your cell phone number. And I can send you, you can just shoot me a text. That's probably faster. Does the number begin with 384?
Correct.
Okay. So I'll send you a note and you can just text me back
Okay,
and I will close the room.
quickly confirm your number.
860-543-1711.
Thank you. Okay, very good. So now I am looking for for the discussion on the update on 154 Westford Hill Road. I am looking for a motion to move to executive session.
Motion to move.
Second,
That was,
Second.
That was Dick and Janet.
Dick and Janet, thank you. All those in favor of moving to executive session?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Abstentions? And Jeff, I believe you've recused yourself from this discussion on this matter. So Michael, can you put Jeff into executive session? I'm sorry. Yes, Mike.
I just want to make sure with that discussion you had with the other Michael, when you go to executive session, where do I go? Do I wait here? You'll be back?
Anybody who's, you'll stay. I'll
Okay.
pause the recording. I'm going to push all them into a separate spot and then they should come back whenever they're finished. So anybody who's not in the executive session will just stay right here. Don't have to do anything.
And I can tell you it'll be a relatively short discussion, Mike.
No problem. I just didn't want to miss the late part.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll just wait to hear back from you guys, Jeff.
Yes, Mike will bring you back in
Okay, very
or
good.
bring us back in, whichever works, however it works.
Okay,
Jeff, we gotta make sure we don't take any recordings on this also by our secretary, recording secretary.
Yes, Valerie.
I don't go to executive session.
Yeah, so Valerie will not be in the executive
Okay, I
session.
just want to make sure that we
Okay.
cover that.
Yep, and members also, same type of thing. Okay, so go ahead, Mike, do your magic.
Okay. Okay, so I have Alex, Catherine, Doug, Jerry, Janet, Mark, Dick, Jeff. Anybody else?
Bruce,
Bruce, I've got, sorry. And then the other Jeff. So I'm leaving out Tom, Valerie, Paul, Mike, myself, and
no,
Catherine. Those are the,
Tom should be in,
okay.
and he's a sitting member of this meeting. And Jeff Schillinger should actually be held out as he's recused himself.
Okay, all right. So there should be 10 of you. You're going to get kicked out. When you're done, let me know. You'll be given the option to leave the room. You'll come back to this regular meeting. And then if you don't do anything, it'll bring you back automatically because I don't know if anybody that's participating with phone has the option. So I'm going
Okay.
to open that now and it should move you.
Okay. Everyone join.
Okay.
Okay. I think our 10 are back.
Okay.
And now we'll move to the update on the Lake District regulations. And Mike Panic is here, correct? There's Mike. Okay. Okay, Mike, you want to take the stage?
Sure. So last meeting, we kind of went over the memo and the draft that I'd given to everybody as sort of a first look at the direction that we might think about heading. One of the things that we talked about wanting to make sure of is that we don't, make everything so that it's all sort of up for grabs from a development perspective, in that we don't want people to be tripling the size of their houses and putting on 3 floors and creating these monster houses all around the lake, which would lead to a number of other issues. But the sentiment I got at least was that the commission was comfortable with the idea of coming up with a regulation that actually fit for these areas, because they are so different from the rest of town. I didn't get any comments from any individual commissioners that I to address, but one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about in response to that discussion was the best way to regulate the size of the house. And there are a couple of ways to do that. One of the things that I included in the draft was talking about building coverage. The problem with building coverage is that it only regulates the coverage of the building on a lot. It does not regulate the total size of that building, which means the building coverage of a 1-story house and the 4-story house that have the same footprint would be the same, which doesn't quite get to the concerns that were discussed. So one of the components that I've been sort of working through the math and figuring out if it will work, but is floor area ratio, which would basically, we would set a threshold, and that takes into account the total size of the structure, which means that someone that had a smaller lot versus a larger lot would not be disproportionately affected by the way the regulations were written. And you would not end up with a situation where someone decided they were going to add 2 stories to a ranch, and now we have this 3-story house that's on the lake that has a great view. That's sort of not appropriate for, I think, the comments that I've received. So I'm still working through that, because it involves kind of finding the right balance. But I want to make sure I'm headed in the right direction. So that's the feedback I'm looking for at this point from you guys.
Yeah, Mike, if I can weigh in there. 25, 30 years ago, I was on a committee to look at the issues of Coventry Lake. I lived in Coventry at the time. And this was before they ended up having to put sewers in the whole area. And they were trying to find a way to avoid the pollution in the lake without having to resort to sewers, which at the time cost Coventry something like $3 to $5 million of extra cost to put the sewers in. And, and that is the downside that we as a town face, is if the pollution in either of these lakes exceed what the state will determine as allowable, we could be forced to put city type sewers in these lakes. So it's in our interest to make sure that the buildings that are on this lake do not contribute to anything that would pollute the lakes. One of the things that was put forth in Coventry was that if you had a building sitting on a foundation of X by Y, if you were to tear that building down and put a new building on, it could not be any bigger than X by Y. You could not expand the footprint of the building. You could not increase the impervious area. And if anything, there was encouragement to decrease the impervious area by using crushed stone driveways instead of asphalt driveways. If you wanted to try to go up in the size of the building by going up, you had to be able to pass the sanitation district's requirements, if you added 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, your septic system had to be sized to be able to do that. And in most cases, it couldn't be done. So it basically limited dramatically the amount of development that you could do in the lake, Coventry Lake. I also looked at that one that you sent for the, I guess, the lake in Lebanon. That
Marlboro.
one, Marlboro. That was like over the effing top. I mean, 24 pages. I looked at the regulations in Coventry, and peppered throughout Coventry were the things I just talked about. And it's not as important now that they have septic systems there, but they still are restricting development on Coventry Lake. I also looked at Colchester, which has another big lake, and there was absolutely no regulations relative to the lake. So I would be very leery about putting anything that resembled what you found in Marlboro. That is like over the top.
I agree.
Several other areas that I noticed that you had in your document was in terms of special permitted uses, you indicated interior lots. I don't understand how you could put an interior lot when you've got, 1/4 acre or 1/2 acre lots in the whole area. So
That just came from the existing underlying residential zone, the way it's written now.
So I mean,
So I just kept that language consistent. I'm not suggesting the commission should entertain further chopping up of property, but I just carried that use over from the language that we have now.
if we were to permit an interior lot, it would have to be in conformance with the interior lots regulations that we have in the RA zone now. The other thing is places of worship, education, and philanthropy. I'd rather, if you look at what's required in the RA zone for those occupancies, there's no way you could possibly do those in the lake districts. Nor do I think you're going to build a church on a 1/4 acre, lot. The only other thing that I did notice that wasn't thought about, and probably someone from Lake Chaffee or Ashford Lake could help me here. The only business that I really know that's a retail business in Lake Chaffee is Ralph's Bait Shop. And that's been there like forever. By and large, there aren't much in the way of retail businesses or other home businesses on Lake Chaffee. There's several contractors that, have their trucks and some of their equipment by their homes, but it's not a big thing. I would say we want to look at what is already there in terms of Lake Chaffee and Ashford Lake to see if there are other home occupations that are significant. I think there would be a lot of folk that would not want to see Ralph's Bait Shop go away. It's kind of like a fixture of Lake Chaffee. It's not covered by the zoning in what we have, but I would think everyone would want it to be there because basically a lot of folk fish in Lake Chaffee and they go to Ralph's Bait Shop to get their supplies. Bed and
Nothing would
breakfast.
happen. The zoning regs aren't retroactive, so I can't tell anybody that was here the minute before the reg is adopted that they have to change their operation. So they would remain non-conforming as they are now. So the other uses, the home occupation was included because there may be lawful home occupations, legitimate reasons why someone would want to have a home occupation from their property. So I carried that over because they're allowed to do it now. So I didn't think it made sense to prohibit them from doing something they could do now. But everything else is, we can remove places of worship, those things. Like I said, I carried them over, but yeah, I'm not suggesting that they need to stay in if the commission doesn't agree.
Yeah, the bed and breakfast would, if it is within the current RA zones, it would be okay. And of course, we all know that the potential for short-term rentals is high in both areas. Uh, the the one of the items that is going to come back up at us is this idea of in-law apartments. We had previously in our regulations stipulated that in-law apartments would have to have someone that's related to someone. And it looks like some of this desegregate Connecticut is going to upend some of that. So maybe we need to study that in concordance with our regulations on in-law apartments. As far as farm stands, there was a number of issues with a couple of people that were trying to run a farm on some of these small lots on Lake Chaffee. I think one of the farms was called Circle G, and they had turkeys and chickens and all sorts of things. And I think it caused quite a consternation with the neighbors because they were so in close proximity of the neighbors. I think they eventually moved to a location on Kidderbrook and no longer running a farm in Lake Chaffee. And I think that would probably bump up against some of the rules and regulations of the Lake Chaffee Association, which
Dick, this is, excuse me, having anything except for cat and dog or canary is a violation of our deed restrictions.
yeah,
And we have a new resident here. His trucks are parked in the road, and a couple of them are in the driveway, but hanging halfway out into the road and obstructing traffic. And I think we need to talk to them about it, especially, he was parked out there and during a snowstorm. And I was surprised that the town didn't do something about it. But that's what I need to talk to Mike about, as a zoning officer, about what he's doing there.
So farm stands themselves, as discussed, is really, we're talking about fruits and vegetables as opposed to livestock.
And a farm stand wouldn't necessarily mean that they were growing it at that spot. Right.
I believe under our regs. Yeah, I believe so.
Doug, you're more knowledgeable here. Isn't a farm stand usually selling something from the farm adjacent to the stand?
Correct. I think.
Yeah, I believe our regs require it to be the sale of goods on the property, because otherwise it's just retail. But again, the reason I carried them over is because they can do these things in that zone now. So they can have a farm stand, they can have a home occupation, all those things, they can do them now. The goal of this reg is to fix the issues related to the development of the properties for bulk standards, so that the houses aren't too big for the lot and setbacks. It didn't come to us because we have complaints about other things. And I mean, we can move in this direction, but I didn't get any feedback from the commission that they really wanted to restrict the uses beyond what was allowed elsewhere. We can do that, but they can do all of these things there now. If it's a special permit, then they need a special permit. I didn't change any of those categories, but
Yeah, Mike, I think the key thing is, and I would ask Mike from Lake Chaffee and Jerry from Lake Chaffee, by and large, if you have a cottage that's on Lake Chaffee and you want to do an improvement, and I've seen several along Route 89 that have been upgraded, but they've all maintained the same footprint of the building that they had raised and built a new one on top of it. They may go a little bit higher, but they have kept the same footprint. On these small lots, I don't think it is of the interest of the association and the water quality of the lake to try to build bigger homes on smaller lots. Recognize Mike.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was looking at something. I wasn't looking at the group. Go ahead.
What's the score of the game?
No, no, it was Mike's zoning regs. Honestly, it really was.
All kidding aside, one of the things at Lake Chaffee, I've been the president there for the last almost 4 years. One of the things that I think that we're most concerned about, and the reason why I'm sitting in on the last couple of meetings with this topic, is that I've seen 3 homes built since I've gotten there. I have a 700 square foot 3-season cottage, but 2 of the 3 homes that were built where the old home was destroyed and a new one was built are absolute behemoths. One was built right on the main drag. It's a big square gray blob. It's a 2.5-story monster, and there's no yard. You go out the back door right to the deck and you fall into the lake. I mean, the lot coverage, I'm not sure how it passed. I wasn't involved in town meetings when that went up, but that guy apparently had a bunch of smaller outbuildings, and the town made him tear all the outbuildings down, and then I'm not sure what happened, but then a behemoth came in. Currently, there's another house right around the corner on a very small dirt side street. That's another behemoth that's been being built for almost 9 months, and again, it's a monster. And the problem with big houses is that the people that are on the other side of the street lose their view almost immediately. So, I would want to be more involved and be mindful of people that are on the lake building behemoths. And then the second part, which I think is really more important, is there's an awful lot of small lots. And I heard Tammy say earlier that the town would be interested in like tiny houses and things like that. There are plenty of lots that are undersized there's some currently for sale, but they don't meet the regs in order to get a house or a cottage, even if it's a 3-season one. So I would be more interested in seeing the availability to develop some of the smaller lots with smaller cottages, maybe not homes because they'd be too small, but like to see some opportunity there. And that's for me personally, not as the president of Lake Chaffee, because I don't want to speak for the board without conferring with them. But personally, I think that we have a lot of secondary lots off the lake that could be redeveloped that would bring tax dollars to the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So Mike D'Amato, would the limitation on some of those smaller lots and smaller homes pretty much be Eastern Highlands and the septic system and such?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, we don't currently in any, we don't regulate lot coverage for residential. We do on the commercial side, but not for the residential. So
Right.
if you meet the setbacks, you can build as big and as wide as you want. The restricting factor in most cases, yes, is the health code, because they need to show that they can build a code compliant septic, that they have a reserve septic area, then they need to have a well, and all of those need to be certain distances from buildings and from other wells and from other septics. And so it gets challenging with layout. I don't know how the health code treats 3-season versus full-time homes, if there's any sort of dialing back the requirements. But I agree that the goal in my mind of the reg is to prevent big houses really doubling or tripling their square footage, which is going to double or triple their discharge into a septic system, double and triple potential runoff. But currently people pretty much everybody I've dealt with in that area, they couldn't put on a deck to go and sit out by the water. These types of things, the regs just don't work. So what I want to do is use the floor area ratio or some other coverage calculation, which we don't currently have at all, and limit what someone can do as far as building size. But if they want to put on a deck or a small porch, that is going to be something that's a little more reasonable. But we don't, yeah, I mean, we have to get a handle on coverages. We can certainly look into talking about regulating impervious area and talking about drainage and infiltration and all of those things. A lot of towns do. That will increase the complexity of the reg, but we can certainly go there if the commission thinks it's important.
But Mike, I don't have the most recent regulation in front of me, but I do believe we did some regulation of impervious areas and lot coverage in the RA zone.
We have some mention of impervious. So there's a bunch of different things. You have lot coverage, you have building coverage, you have impervious coverage. So we mention all of those types of things in all the other zones. I was just scrolling through quickly in the RA zone, and I didn't see anything. But at the end of the day, with the RA zone, we're talking 2 acres. And so coverage on 2 acres is going to be totally different. A lot of these properties are 1/10 of an acre, 2/10 of an acre. So I think we still need to come up with something that we think is appropriate for a piece of property that may be 1/8 of an acre, so that we don't. And the other thing that I will point out is that Ashford's regulations are written just like almost every other town that I've ever read, which basically says that, let's say, the side yard setback is 25 feet. There's an existing small house that is 10 feet from the property line, which means it's 15 feet into the setback. The way that Ashford's regs are written, it says that provided you meet all the other standards, you can basically go up, even though you will now double the volume of house that's in the setback. Because you're not getting closer to the property line, you can build up, which is why you're seeing the footprint on some of these houses not change. All 4 of those setbacks may be blown. They may be within those setbacks, but because they're not expanding the overall footprint, the regs, the way they're written now, allow them to go up. That's very common.
They're not making any more non-conforming.
Correct. So there's an argument to be made for whether you're increasing the nonconformity if you go from a 900 square foot house to a 3,000 square foot house, because you now have a lot more house than you did. But the way the regs are written here, and I went over this with Ken Slater because I wanted to be sure, because I've gotten some pushback from people that have some projects that are in progress around the lake. As long as you're not getting closer and everything else meets the regs, you can go up to the max 35 feet.
Well, and that comes up to the issue of height. Going back to my experience with Coventry Lake years ago, a good friend of mine built a house on an existing footprint and went up 4.5 stories. Gorgeous home, even had an elevator.
You'd have to.
Probably a $500,000 home, but it definitely is. Mike said, it was a behemoth of a house, and he did this before these septic systems came in to Coventry. I think our first and foremost goal needs to be that we don't tip the scales with the pollution in a lake that would require the state to say that Ashford needs to put in a septic system in one of these lakes. So that really hits to the point of adding bedrooms and baths and things to these large homes. It hits the point of impervious areas, lot coverage, asphalt versus pebble stone, things like that. I don't think we would want to go anywhere near what that thing you sent us from Marlboro. That was like over the top. But I think we need to do things that would protect the water quality of the lakes.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that Marlboro was a good. I just wanted to kind of show you the other end of the spectrum, if you will.
So, Mike, you're really talking about some combination of building coverage and floor area ratio is what you're looking at right now?
Well, I guess I wanted to make sure that I was understanding the discussions correctly in that we want to make sure that we don't allow people to go up, but we make sure that the reg is responsive to the fact that these properties are smaller. And that, I guess what I'm hearing is that maybe what I'm hearing, I don't know, you tell me, is that we want to also consider looking at runoff and discharge and drainage and all, I mean, standards which aren't really in the regs now. I mean, around these areas, do we want to start looking at, a lot of towns have low impact development standards, which say if you increase by a certain percentage on your property, you have to come up with a way to deal with that runoff on site so that it's not just getting sent into the road or into the lake or whatever. I mean, we can do that. What's the commission's feeling?
Well, this is Mark Schnobel. Back to Dick's comment on height. I mean, should that be a consideration of having a maximum Lake District height for a building? That would limit, having to worry about a 4-story structure?
Yeah, well, the way that I wrote it, we're limited now to 35 feet or 2.5 stories, which can be dialed down again. I mean, so you can certainly do that. There are other, like I said, there are other ways that we can deal with it. I just want to make sure that I'm addressing the commission's intent properly when I go back and start revising this, and how deep you guys want to go with things like size and runoff. And
Mike Panic, some feedback, please. I know, we've talked about the behemoth and things like this, even with the current restriction of 35 feet. Do you feel that some type of a limitation would benefit the lake residents?
I think a couple things that I know that the town is aware of, and I'm sure this board is aware of. Obviously, our lake and the area that we own around the lake is chartered by the state of Connecticut. So we're bound by that charter. We're also bound by the rules and regulations that were set way back in the early 50s when the lake was put together. Certainly, like I said, I've only been there for 4 years, and I'm on a quick learning curve to learn as well. But what I think is most important for us as residents and us as a board is that the behemoths that I'm talking about may meet the regulations, or may be able to get an engineer to squeeze them into the town's regulations, but they might not necessarily fit into some of the rules and regulations that we have for development on the property. And I know it's been said a couple times at the inland wetlands meeting that I've been attending, and at this meeting possibly, that nobody's going to listen to the lake's rules. We're the town, we make the rules, and I understand that. But I think that if, especially the big gray house out on the main drag there that went up about 2 years ago, where the gentleman had a bunch of lean-tos and the town came down on him, and the next thing you know, this mammoth was built. There has to be some sort of dialogue, and maybe it didn't happen in the past because maybe past people on the board weren't interested in the town, and maybe the town wasn't seemingly so interested in Lake Chaffee, and we were like ugly stepchildren or something. I don't know the history, but there's got to be some dialogue with the lake. There are plenty of people. There's a whole new breed of people, myself included, that have come to Lake Chaffee in the last 5 years that are concerned about the same things that you are: runoff, heights, and the wetlands issues. I've been to several meetings because there's been some stuff there in the last couple of months. And me personally, as the new president, would like to be more involved in what's going on in the town. It was very nice to hear the new select woman speak about different things and how she can help. And we had to go through raising our annual taxes. We had to go through the state of Connecticut and get on a bill. So that was right when I came in. So I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I just want the commission to know in general that I like what I'm hearing from you guys. I like the interest that you're taking in both lakes in town. And we want to reversely be involved so that, we do not get what we want, but we at least get something that everybody can be happy with, the town and the lake residents. And, our association wants to be more involved, a lot more than maybe they were in the past, so that I don't come up there on some Sunday to fish and take my boat out and see this behemoth going up and I didn't know anything about it. And shame on me for maybe not checking on the town website. and seeing what was going on. But, you know, that certainly will change going forward. And thanks for a few minutes.
Yeah, the behemoth you're talking about that's on Route 89 there,
Yeah.
Yes.
that did not come up for approval with planning and zoning. That
I
was
mean, how is that possible? He's like no grass.
it was approved by the building official at the time. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong.
It never came across our desks or anything on it, and
Yeah,
there were no with the current footprint, there were no issues regarding its movement or anything.
Well, they used all the outbuildings as the footprint.
Yeah.
It's got, that house is a lot bigger than the original house. And I don't know how it got passed that it got approved.
I
Because
mean,
he's right to
literally,
the
you
property
open the
line.
slide
on
glass
each
door
side.
and you're on the deck. And then you take off this deck and you're in the lake. And the front
And-
yard is right on 89. There's just nothing. And that the way that happened, and I don't know how, and I wasn't here for whenever the meetings were, but to walk into a building department and have a building inspector issue a permit for that without there's some way being planning and zoning involved or in the wetlands involved is a head scratcher to me. And I just want to make sure something like that doesn't happen again. I made a big investment in a lake piece of property and I want to protect it just as much as you guys want to protect the town. And I do appreciate what you guys are doing month to month to make sure that that continues.
Yeah, and Jeff, I asked about that several years back and was told it met everything, but that's neither here nor there. I think what we need to do is make sure that we don't let that happen again.
Agreed.
And being, now that actually it's, having the building inspector and the zoning officer, being in separate, it's all the more important for those to communicate and get information across as to if there's any concern on anything or anything that should be looked at. Giving anyone a heads up that something either doesn't sound right or should be checked into. So again, that communication is important. Mike, I'd like to suggest something, and you tell me, maybe I should take it offline, but I'm wondering if a subcommittee would help you give you some feedback as opposed to this once a month thing and really being out on your own and hoping that you're guessing right and going down the right avenues. That potentially, I think it would be a great thing to include members from each of the lake districts also.
Well, one thing I was thinking about is because the sheer number of lots are surrounding both lakes, something that I could do is I could develop an online web survey that could be sent to the associations that could distribute to their members that would allow us to ask them questions about what they see as issues with the regs, major concerns that they have, their thoughts for the best use of the parcels. We could develop the questions. I could send it out in an online survey format so that we could analyze and aggregate the results. And then I could present them back to you. And you could see 60% of the people feel that water quality is the biggest issue facing the lake in the next 5 years, or the zoning regs are too restrictive. I mean, I don't know
or home value or whatever it is. Yeah.
So we could tailor the question so that we would be able to make informed decisions based on their responses. And I think we would probably get more done only because some people don't like the web meetings, and with COVID, they don't want to meet in person. And so I think we might get a greater percentage of involvement if they just had to click some buttons when they had a few minutes. But
Mike, I would encourage, when you send this out, don't make it sound like it's a vote. It's for information only that we're taking.
Sure.
Otherwise we could build expectations that we can't meet.
I mean, if you think this is a good idea, I would put it all together and we would review it at the next meeting. I'm not going to just send it out. So you guys could have a chance to look at the questions. I have someone at CHA who helps us with public outreach that can make sure that we're asking them in the right way so that we get the data responded to correctly so we can actually use it properly. So we can go through that and really design the questions. I'm not thinking we're going to ask, 20 questions, something that'll take a couple of minutes, but then we'll be able to say, listen, we can use that to inform the revisions. And then we'll have an email list so we can distribute it and say, hey, now we're having a public hearing, come participate. So it's kind of something that will work twice.
Let me ask a question of Mike Panic. Do you think it would be more effective for a fewer number of questions going to a larger group of the lake districts, or a larger, more complete set of questions going to your board members representing those lake districts?
I like option B better. More comprehensive questions of the actual board, which comprises of 13 people. Because of the 13 people, Jerry included, who's on your board, albeit from me and 2 other board members, most of the board members, like some of the people I see here, have been at the lake for a long time and know a lot about what they like and what they don't like. So I like polling our board as opposed to polling the residents, because 40% of the residents are only there in the summer.
Yeah, Mike, is Carrie Olson on your board?
She is.
That would be very good, because Carrie is a land use attorney.
Yeah.
And I think she would bring, and she owns a property on the lake.
Yeah, she does.
And I think she'd bring a very good perspective to this.
Which is why I thought option B would be good. There's 5 members of the board, including Carrie, that'll have much more impact than trying to email 244 people where 230 of them won't respond.
And
So is that helpful, Mike?
We've tried the email thing in-house at Lake Chaffee, and better to send it to the board members. That's why we're board members, because we care.
Right, exactly. That's kind of a thing. Mike, does that sound feasible?
Sure. So I will come up with basically a list of questions that can be sent to both boards for review, and I'll try to write it so that it's more work on our part and less work on their part, so it's not time consuming for them to respond, and then we'll distribute it. Do you want me to do that and present it back to you at the next meeting, or do you just want me to email it to you, Jeff? We don't really have a rush. I mean, it's not like we're slowing anybody down. So if you want me to do that and the commission to review it at the next meeting, I can do it that way.
I'd like the commission to review it the next meeting and give input.
Okay.
On that. Okay.
So I'll write something up, I'll pull it together, and then we can review the questions at the next meeting.
And go for a large number. I mean, go for, be as in depth as you feel, get us to 20. And if we pare it down to 15, or we think something's, redundant or not useful, then, we can do that. But the more choices or the more options, the better.
Okay.
Yeah, Janet,
Janet, we're going to say something?
I think you live.
Yeah, I was trying to talk. For those who don't know, I live at Ashford Lake. And I just wanted to say to Mike D'Amato, we got sort of sidetracked, but I think the runoff is really a big issue that maybe should be addressed. And also, I agree with Dick that the Marlboro regs are pretty outrageous, but I thought they had some interesting points on retaining walls. And I wonder if that's something we should look into. And I don't know if Jean Pillow, the water quality lady, would have any thoughts on that.
What specifically what was most interesting, or when you talked about retaining walls?
They talked about, if you put up a retaining wall, it can make your next door neighbor's yard erode. And also, I know there's a house on Ashford Lake that has one, and it's so if you're kayaking by it, it's just this huge wall. There's no. So I think it's probably not good for the aquatic life if you have a whole bunch of them all around the lake. I'm not an expert on it, but
I'll go back and look at how they dealt with the retaining walls from a zoning perspective. I mean, I know that wetlands deals with it, but I don't But I will look to see how they addressed it in
Mike.
Marlborough.
Mike Panic, you wanted to
I
comment?
was gonna say, we're concerned about the retaining walls and our, as well at Lake Chafee. And over the past 4 months, I've been to every meeting of the Inland Wetlands Commission. And let me tell you, they are on top of retaining walls because Lake Chafee had 3 that came before the board. And they were lengthy discussions, and they definitely, for Lake Chafee, have retaining walls on their mind, and 2 of the 3 got rejected. Plus, they were asking for like civil engineers and, you know, nothing on a napkin written down. They were really, I was impressed that the Inland Wetlands Commission and how they were also concerned about Lake Chafee and runoff, and they're a good group of people as well. So, you know.
Well, maybe we should talk to them, and maybe they would like to see some kind of regulation put in.
Well, probably Mike can talk with Joe Thoreau and touch base with him on some of the input they've been talking about with the lake, things like that, and get that tied up into these this survey.
Yeah, it's a hot button topic at Lake Chafee the last 4 months.
I've sat in on a couple of those sessions. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay. Mike, did you have anything else regarding the Lake District?
Nope, I've got some homework to do.
Okay. Yeah, keep talking. You'll get more. See that?
Yeah, Mike, I'll
Sorry, Mike.
put my comments in writing to you, so you'll have them written down.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the new business. And again, we had moved up Tammy Nuccio. And so, and just going back, again, it's pretty deflated now, the discussion on desegregate Connecticut. Just a couple of comments I wanted to make is, again, I sat in on a session and I think they have it in desegregate. I think they have it recorded and posted for any of those sessions that they've had with planning and zoning commissioners and a number of different of these state reps dialing in. I think there were like 111 or something on the one that I attended a week and a half or so ago. They also have this booklet that is available for downloading, Planning for Affordability in Connecticut. And it starts to discuss the 830, 8-30 G and its implementation and such. But a couple of the things that were interesting, and again, I go back to my statement of if you build it, they will come. You know, I think part of our plan or part of the recognition of any plan we put together is where Ashford is, where we're starting out, in that one of the requirements of there, and I printed that one page and I can't find that one page. It must have fallen on the floor or something. But one of the requirements is do no harm. It's kind of like, are your current zoning regulations prohibitive of desegregation or affordable housing, if you will? And, you know, do you restrict 3 and 4 bedroom family dwellings and things like this? And I think a first stage step for us is to make sure that our regs, review of our regs that, again, do not allow for a prohibitive nature toward affordable housing. I'd hate to see us go through a ton of work on something for affordable housing. And as I said, you know, I keep going back to Field of Dreams. You know, if you build it, is anybody going to show? Is anybody really going to care if we build this, except for the fact we have to put a certain number page document out for the state to look at and check off. You know, I think again, if we deal with the in-laws, we've done some things past in-law apartments. We've done some things with you know, the definitions of family. We've also done some things with, we've talked about our parking. We think our parking requirements might be a bit restrictive as we've gone through the Dollar General implementation. I think our I can't remember what the number is, how many per, not square foot or whatever it is, but we do have a large number. Maybe that's something we can look at also to adjust towards the affordable housing requirements and what they're talking about here. So I think there are a number of items here that we can show both movement and potential movement on in a plan. But again, I think our first step potentially will be to not make our regs restrictive of affordable housing. Maybe not lay out the plan for a brand new apartment complex or something, but again, make it so that nothing limits any of these accessory dwelling units or multifamily homes, middle housing. I think that's what you called it, Michael. Again, I think there's a happy medium we can come up with in here without really knocking ourselves out, but following at least the spirit of the law, working towards the letter of the law.
Jeff, hitting on some of the items you bring up, we know already that some in-law apartments are being rented out. In particular, I'll cite our former first selectman, Ralph Fletcher. He's renting out an in-law apartment in his house, and I'm sure there's other cases like that. So we have a decision to say, is that going to be acceptable? Maybe it should be. The other issue that we have that we got to be careful of, since we're so close to Yukon, is do we want to make it possible to divide up larger homes into smaller units that could be rented out to Yukon students? That's really not affordable housing, but that is a problem that Yukon has dealt with. So that's going to be on the table as we look at this. We have not really addressed multifamily housing in terms of our zoning yet. I don't think we have anything that's addressing building new apartments. Have to go back. I think that's more on the commercial side, but that's something we can address. The issue of whether or not we allow things that we haven't allowed is something to think about. I mean, we, by and large, when we've looked at the revision of the RA zone, we've really favored single family and duplex homes. We really haven't addressed multifamily homes. We have addressed the, B&B rentals, not, can't get the right name down, but we've addressed the short-term rentals.
Short-term.
Yeah. So I think that needs to stay in place, but I think maybe there's some other things we can extend by that. Getting that grant to allow us to systematically look at this, I think would be to our advantage, because it would show good intent of addressing the issues that the state has put forth.
Okay, and again, please, to familiarize yourself, please go online to Desegregate Connecticut, take a look at some of their platform, their policies, some of the groups involved. And if you do have, or you think of any specific questions to offer up to John Filczek, though his presence is not wanted by some members of the committee. We will.
Okay, Jeff.
We'll see what we can offer out there, whether it's attendance or whether it's just responding to those questions. So we have it for our next meeting.
And if anybody has questions for me, or doesn't, if I'm on a legislative committee for the Connecticut Association of Zoning Enforcement Officials, so we are reviewing the draft bills before they are actually going to be presented on the floor and making comments. So if you have questions about where things are or when things start to hit, you can certainly reach out to me, and I'll try to let you know where things stand and keep you updated as we go through the meetings. There is some very well presented data on housing in Connecticut from some nonprofit organizations that talk about the housing situation in Connecticut, and they do it town by town. And it will be very helpful as we move into the process of creating the affordable housing plan. So I'll leave it there.
And Also, I think John had mentioned in his email to me that the bills, I think are recommended bills or suggestions for bills are coming up either this week or next week or something.
Yeah, the original desegregate CT bill, if you want to call it that, was proposed by Senator Anwar out of South Windsor, was 53 pages. The revised bill is 17 and still has a lot of the things in it, but it's been fixed dramatically. All these things that we're talking about are still going to be in there, but what people are thinking will happen is they're going to start realizing they have a lot of stuff to do in the session, even though it's a long session, and they may just pick out bits and pieces of what they actually want to get done. And so all of these things that are creating all this turmoil in every town in Connecticut are likely not to pass. Many of them might, but I don't know that all of them will. We'll still have to write an affordable housing plan. The Department of Housing still says we have to have one. We still will be subject to 8-30G if we don't have 10% housing stock, deed restricted affordable. All those things are not going away. But I don't know that everything desegregate CT is talking about will make its way through, because I don't think they have the time, but we'll see.
All right.
If I can jump in on a couple of old businesses that fell off the wagon. We were working on a zoning map, and that has not yet been a draft put forward. Mike, I think you've got everything that we can think of to give you. We need to generate that zoning map.
The reason why I have paused the zoning map is because the Lake District regs will change the zoning map. So I figure we shouldn't change it twice. So once we get the Lake District situated and create those zones, we can adopt a zoning map that includes that and just do it once.
Yeah, and then concomitant with that is we should start looking at the interstate zone. You know, we definitely put off what we were doing with the people that were trying to propose things for that. But I think we should look at that zone in total and come up with some guidelines for it. It's not that, it's only like 3 or 4 pages long, and there's not a whole lot to look at to change.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Dick. It would be the next, both of those have a priority, a 1A and a 1B, but I think it's contingent upon us to get the Lake District, to get the zoning map, to get to the industrial interchange. Probably in that order. So, Michael, anything to report, zoning officer?
The only thing that I'll say is that we have a new land use clerk. She started, I think this is going to be her second week, maybe third, Katie Connolly. She, from what I have seen, is going to be extremely capable and really a good fit. Has a lot of horsepower, which is great. So we're going to be working on some things administratively in our office. There's a lot of efficiencies that can be realized with, so we're going to be working on that. The other thing that I have been working towards is getting the planning and zoning applications that I review through the town's online permitting system so people can apply online. We're working towards that. So they're boring and they take a lot of time on the back end. They move slowly, but are all good things that hope to have done soon.
Excuse me, what type of clerk did you say she was?
The land use clerk.
Okay.
She's taking over the position that Beverly Ferentz had.
And I understand she's also looking at some of the files and things and trying to consolidate those and get out old useless information and such from those.
One of the things that is perhaps the biggest frustration for me when I got here, but also the thing that creates inefficiencies, is that planning, zoning, wetlands, health, ZBA, everybody has different files. And so you have to look in 5 different places to make sure you do or do not have the document. When someone calls and says, I need a plot plan, I've got to go to 5 files to make sure that
it's the most up to date and proper,
or that it exists. And so what I have been going through slowly when I pull a file and combining them to make it one. So what we'll do is go from a building file, a zoning file, a P&Z file. We'll have a street file. It'll be everything that we have for one piece of property so that people are making sure they're getting a comprehensive set of documents. So that is probably priority number 1. And then there's some other things that we've talked about, but that will greatly increase our ability to make sure we're reviewing all the documents that we have.
Okay, great. Yes. Kat, I see our first selectman has rejoined us here.
I never truly left you.
Oh, okay.
I also wanted to add that Katie, the new land use clerk, has also taken some training on the system that we have, and I can't remember the name of the system, Michael.
Permit
But
link.
what is great is she's going to be able to use capabilities that had not been being used before. We had very limited use before when Bev was working with it. Bev had her own methods and her own system to work with. But in this case, this is really using the technology the way it should be used. And there's a lot that it can do. And that's going to be more efficient as well. And she's taken to it quite well.
What is her last name?
Connolly.
Connolly?
Yeah. It's like Demetrio Connolly. I can send that to you.
Okay.
Even better, Michael can.
Anything else, Michael, from your report?
No, not at this point.
Okay.
How are we doing in terms of hours? I know we're not in face-to-face hours, but in the past, we had Wednesday evening hours. Is there anything resembling that for Wednesday evening these days?
Do you want to take that, Mr. Selectman?
No, we don't have that. I have been considering having, basically having almost like a Zoom session where people can, if they want to talk with the selectman, the first selectman. But in terms of the other departments being open during those hours, no, we haven't been doing that.
Because in the past, that was the time when a lot of business was conducted.
We actually haven't had requests for that either.
Well, at least,
right, Michael?
At least for the
Yeah.
building department.
I mean, basically what it is now is people call or they email and they say what they need and we just figure out a way to make it happen. Whether that means, I mean, I literally carried a box of street files out into the portico so that someone could go through them. I'm copying and scanning and delivering. And so I think they're probably getting better service than they were. Yes, we're not open, but we are still making sure that access to the files is provided. They just don't come in and look through them themselves. But I haven't had any particular requests that someone come in late at night.
If I can add to that, yeah, we haven't been getting requests for people to come in during what I would call non-standard work hours. If we did, we would find a way to accommodate them.
And I think that's the services take place. The staff remains there. The services are taking place. People are getting the services that they either request or are expecting. And I think the internal staff, from what I understand, is doing a great job in as Michael said, making that happen, whatever the situation is.
I think to tell you the truth, I think we have, because the doors are not open, and people, when they call, it's very pointed in their requests. And we're pretty efficient in trying to get the information back for them. What we don't have are people coming in and kibitzing during the day or at night, just coming in to sit down and chat. And while we lose something from that also, for whatever it's worth, we found that the time that we spend is a little more efficient. You know, they don't just call up on the phone to chat during the day or during the evening. So, and a number of us tend to be here after hours.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the question, Dick. Okay, being as that we are at the end of the agenda, I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Jerry Dufresne.
Second, Janet.
Did you catch that, Valerie?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Amen.
So moved.